While my father was in the dining room talking about God, my mother was always in the kitchen, talking to someone else. She didn't sing, but she never stopped talking. Gossip, my father called it. He'd come in and say, "What are you women gossiping about?" But there was nothing trivial about the way mother could describe a car crash, limb by mangled limb. My father was full of ideas, but mother was full of stories. She was always more real. And what I love most about women is the sound of their voices. My earliest recollection is of women chattering above me cot. In adolescence, my greatest comfort was the soft, posh voices of female presenters on BBC Radio 3. Even in adulthood, those voices have carried me through half a dozen failed careers, a few nervous breakdowns, and thousands of winter colds. Of course, I loved more than my mother's voice. I loved the apple dumplings, which she steamed in a pressure cooker, and which were shaped like Christmas puddings when they came out of the bowl, though the walls of the dumpling were made of pastry and there was stewed apple on the inside. I loved the lamb's hearts she roasted in the oven and the potato cakes she buttered on winter evenings and served with fried eggs. I loved the light in her face when someone was hungry, and how she could draw out more stories than a therapist by simply putting a bowl of soup under someone's nose. And chicken soup was her masterpiece. It simmered on the range in the kitchen every Sunday morning, and it was a Eucharist, more sublime than what the red-faced, blood-pressured fathers in the church presided over, as they doled out answers to every question in the universe from the lofty solitude of their own very masculine sanctuaries. My mother got the chicken soup recipe from her mother, and I remember one evening visiting a cousin's house and catching the familiar aroma in the air. I realized that my granny must have shared her recipe with all her daughters, and that they in turn had passed it on. Passing things on is one of the many things that women do. They pass it on, they share, and knowing beyond words, they understand other people without inquiring or asking blunt questions. Wisdom surfaces in them at birth and death, and at all the emotional turning points in between. They know things men don't know, and they always know how movies will end. They shelter men in the fabric of their knowing, and they intuit a deeper universe when a man's world is falling apart. But it is their voices I love most. I've enjoyed the sound of women singing on CDs, LPs, EPs, the wireless, and even in my Ford Cortina when I was young and had a girlfriend. She sang, and she always insisted on filling the back seat with extra girls on the way home from dances. And they would sing in unison, and invariably we ended up in someone's kitchen where they fried boxty and listened to Patsy Cline and danced with each other while I sat bewildered in the corner. I love when women sing by the fire, flames in their dark eyes, and folds of long brown hair half covering a face as the singer hits the high notes. I love Patsy Cline and Sinead O'Connor, Anna Netrebko and Eleanor Shanley, and all the other voices that have caught my heart at the turn of a stairs over the years. Long ago, poets were always men. Women sat beside them in silent adoration, or so the poets thought, as the poets smoked pipes and blathered in false posh accents. But the women were not doting. They were waiting for their time to arrive. They were waiting for new voices in the public world, waiting for people like Marion Finucane and many others to break the mould of voices in Irish society. They began to be heard on the radio and singing and at poetry, waiting for Ivan Boland and Paula Meehan and Kathleen Maud and Nuala Ní Dhomhnaill and the legion of other poets to spin the hurt and wound of their oppression and weave new love songs and laments. Sometimes men make arguments for God's existence that are less interesting than a half-knit jumper. But women have been my compass, my anchor, the ground and completeness of my universe. As I grow older, they are still the warp and weft of all my spiritual hope, because it was women's eyes that first saw Christ's resurrection, and it was women's voices who sang the song of it until they were silenced. And I suppose this weekend is coming closer to Easter, and it's so difficult sometimes to talk about faith and to talk about it in a way that is free from the patriarchy, the misogyny, the whole structure of history that allowed this all-male institution in Christianity to unfold, and which is now perceived as so divisive. I mean, this week I heard Mary McAleese rightly chastising the present Pope for being a populist, for saying things that are popular and then going back on them. I don't want to get into that sort of political argument, but it's so typical that a woman of the integrity of somebody like Mary McAleese, so faithful to the church and to her faith in her own way, finds herself at a certain point in her life utterly frustrated. Finds herself at a certain point in her life utterly frustrated with the institution. And I suppose that's why I try to talk about stuff like that in a different way. I try and talk about religion and think about religion not as an institutional business, not as the stuff that caused the oppression of so much stuff in human beings. I try and talk about religion in a very personal way as my story. I try to share with you that I am a person of faith, even though I don't belong in the same way as I used to an institution. And sometimes it's kind of scary for me doing this, because I feel, am I saying too much about my own personal or inner life? But when I think about being a writer and writing good sentences, I feel that every sentence you write is striving towards poetry. Every sentence you write is trying to reach some metaphor or symbol or language of transformation. And I can't imagine doing that without a sense of personal inner faith. Because what personal inner faith is to me, in any God, is really about the transformations, the possibilities that are contained in language. Many of them, they transcend our ordinary reality. I mean, if you had a religion that believes in reasonable things, it would be an unreasonable religion. Because faith, by its nature, is stretching the line beyond the possibilities of rational meaning. That's what a metaphor does. When I said that I remember a woman singing like a lark, it's only like a lark, but even still, it could be argued that she didn't sing like a lark. She sang like a human being. But the simile works. And if I was sitting in a pub some night and I look out the window and I see a Toyota full of young, bold males coming towards me because they're going to come in and have a few pints and they're rowdy and robust, and a man at the bar says, "Here comes the Taliban," he doesn't mean that the boys who are heading for the pub in their big jeep are actually the Taliban from Afghanistan. No. But I know what he means, and I know when he says it, it expresses an aspect of really deep truth. So the way we use metaphors, the way we say that some great politician was, the eagle, when we know he wasn't an eagle. They talk about Simone de Beauvoir and Jean-Paul Sartre as being the twin-headed eagle. Well, there you go. There's no twin-headed eagles. But we kind of know that truth is contained in metaphors. And so as a writer, for me, this whole tableau of religious iconography are doorways into the imagination. And they're also doorways into ordinary reality that allows me see not just the mundane and ordinariness of the world around me, but allows me to see it and experience it as being both transcendent and blessed. That it is in some sense as sacred as the fingerprint of a little infant. It has behind it a sense of personhood. And it is in the arms of that personhood that I belong. If I walk in nature, if I walk beside the sea or the lake or under the trees, the sense of belonging that nurtures me and keeps me safe. Even at times when I'm entering into territory that I'm afraid of. If I'm going on a journey that I'm worried about, if I'm going to see a doctor and I'm uncertain what he'll tell me. All those moments are moments where my religious faith becomes active, and to imagine myself, to suppose myself as being enfolded in the tenderness of a loving mother, filled with the motherliness of God. This is very, very consoling. And it's so consoling that it helps me live in the present moment even stronger and better. And that is really, 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 really what the religious faith is for me. It's not the politics of it. It's not the patriarchy of it or the masculinity of it. It is really the sense of its beauty on the inside. For my imagination, it allows me a mindfulness that keeps me in the present moment, because I can tolerate the present moment. I don't feel alienated in the present moment. I feel loved in the present moment. And that's what religion does. I think there's a possibility that all the major religions of the world can do that and do it and will do it more deeply in the future when we begin to realize that they're all languages saying the same thing. They're all languages saying the same thing.